right? We're going to cover blended families. And so how long have you guys been married now, and how long have you been in a relationship for?
Sure. So Rob and I met 8.5 years ago. We're just coming up for our 7th wedding anniversary.
Okay, fine. And Rob was married previously and had a few kids.
Yes. Yep. He was married for 10 years. And when we met, his kids were 5 and 8.
Right. And you had a child as well.
Correct. Yep. I had a little boy who was 3 when we met.
Okay. And so, like for most people listening, or those that are going to be watching this video later on, what were the initial challenges that you came up against? Obviously, you guys met. You probably dated, without kids. Yeah, having a good time.
We did, yeah. It was a very slow burn. I lived in Geraldton, he lived in Perth.
Oh, wow.
So I would see him initially without the kids, and then eventually the kids met. But there was a fair bit of novelty in coming down and visiting him, and getting all the kids together was fun for them in the very beginnings. Right. A lot of fun.
And did you guys find it easy to handle that initially, like bringing the kids together?
I think in that stage, yes. The part that started to become a little trickier was when we actually moved in together.
Right. And so between when you first got together with Rob, how long was it before you introduced the kids to each other?
Reckon we waited maybe 6 months before we introduced the kids.
Make sure that you guys were on the same page, right? That it was going to last.
Yeah, absolutely.
So then the kids met, and then from when they met to when you moved in, what was that sort of time period?
Oh, it was pretty quick, Brett. I think once we knew, so we dived in maybe 2 or 3 months later.
After that, so about 9 months from when you first met, right? Brought the kids. So that was pretty full on.
Yeah, it was. Right. Well, I was moving from Geraldton to Perth, so we sort of had to move straight in together, and we thought, give it our best shot. And
then you brought the kids together?
Yes.
And how often would you have those?
Right. So my son, because I had moved from Geraldton to Perth, we had him full time. Yes. His dad was in Geraldton. He would go and visit on school holidays, but he was with us most of the time. His kids were 50-50, but it was split, so it was 2 weekdays and every second weekend. So lots of coming and going.
Right.
With them.
Picking the kids up from school, organising them, taking them back to mum, all those sorts of things, right?
Yeah.
So what were the stresses that came up inevitably in that for you?
Look, I think both sets of kids had been used to being parented different ways.
Yes.
Obviously, we both parented differently. I think this is normal of every relationship. Both parents do parent differently. Of course, that depends on how they were parented themselves. But our kids were used to being parented a certain way. So it was difficult, I think, for them to accept someone else stepping into a parent role. And it was difficult for us to figure out, the best way to do that initially.
So I guess, like for most people that experience this, there's 3 methods of parenting, right? There's yours, there's Rob's, and for his kids, there's their mum.
Yes. Yeah.
So you've got 3 different models of parenting and how they should be looked after and disciplined, right? And to have fun with. Everybody's going to be doing that in a different way based on our own experiences that we have from our own models that we bring to it. So how did you guys find that? Like, that must have been difficult, right?
It was very difficult. And the kids would struggle to get on in those times when it was difficult for us. That was sort of reflected back to us. The kids would start to have niggles between themselves, or there was a lot of, he did this or she did that.
Yes. So one of the dynamics that we obviously talk about in the relationship code is that kids need 2 main things. The first is they need love. And how we give love and how we put it out depends on our love language, even for kids, right? Because kids all have different love languages. Some like touch more, some like praise more, some like people doing things for them more. So we've got that dynamic, and they need attention. So in that dynamic, you must have experienced all of them seeking different amounts of attention.
Absolutely.
So did you find that your son naturally would come to you to try and get attention because he wasn't sure whether he was going to get it from Rob, and Rob would have been focused on his two boys.
Yeah, and that's the natural way for everyone, right? We all naturally will favour our child or go towards our children, and they'll naturally come to us.
But even
I think we had
if I can jump in there, Angie, even if they're biologically our own kids, we're naturally going to, just personality-wise, have a different relationship with every child because of their personality. And so it's very easy for the kids to interpret that perhaps they're not getting what they need from us. And in a blended family situation, it's even worse. So how did you guys cope with that initially? Was that quite difficult? Was that before you met us?
No. Thankfully, I already had you guys. And I was already a couple of years into my journey with relationship code. So I was lucky enough to have great help with that stage. But it was difficult, absolutely. And, you know, Rob's youngest was used to being the youngest, and my youngest, my child was used to being an only child. So there was a lot of territorialness that came between those two kids, fighting for that youngest child.
Right.
And we had to really pay close attention to that.
Yep. So as kids, we need different things from our parents, and we need different things from our dad as compared to our mum. So with 3 young boys, how was their relationship with Rob, and how was Rob's kids' relationship with you? Break that down into 2 answers.
Oh, okay. So in the beginning, his boy, like you say, his boys naturally went to him for everything. And
so if they played up, like if they were naughty, who would discipline?
Oh, we learned pretty quickly the discipline would have to come from their biological parent. And like I said, we're lucky that we had great guides in that. Our mentor did say to us that the discipline is best received from the biological parent. So we actually just had to work really hard to communicate with one another and then get on the same page. And then the biological parent would be the one to really deliver the discipline. But certainly in the early days, I mean, it was difficult because I was home with the kids a lot more on school holidays. And I did have to pull them up from time to time.
Absolutely, right. So how did Rob's kids react to that, with Rob obviously being off at work or whatever, and some days you being at home? How did they react to that? Was there...
It was definitely hard for them to take it sometimes. And
did they play up?
no matter how... they didn't play up more for me, but it affected their relationship more with Noah, my son. So it would come out in other ways.
Yes. So you'd notice some exclusion there, or some jockeying, and that sort of thing when you had to do that. Yeah, absolutely. And did it take Noah, your son, a while to get used to Rob?
Yes. Yeah, I think that's been quite a journey as well.
Yes.
Taken them a while to get used to one another. I think that's a two-way thing. He's different to Rob's boys, and he does require a different parent. I think all kids require parenting differently, but it's taken a little while for Rob to learn exactly how to do that with Noah, and it's taking a while for Noah to learn how to receive Rob.
Yeah, so to find like a relationship with Rob.
Yeah.
Because obviously he's got his dad, right? So he'll go and see his dad occasionally up in Geraldton. School holidays and those sorts of things. Then he comes back, and I would imagine, like for most people, he's going to be parenting differently to you.
Of course.
Different boundaries, different ways of reacting to Noah.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then Noah comes back, and then there's a completely different set of rules.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we have to prepare for that too. We do set aside a bit of time for the transition.
Right.
Whenever them, and as they're getting older, it's less and less. But when they were younger, both with the boys and with Noah, there was definitely a transition period of time where we'd know that they're going to receive us differently. It's going to take a while for them to settle in. We would consciously go a little bit gentler on them and spend more quality time together to build that relationship back up faster, because it did sort of, I don't want to say the relationship relationship broke every time they went, but it definitely affected the relationship each time they'd come back. And
yes.
I mean, you can understand why that would be the case for small children, but you really have to factor it in and consciously parent them with that in those
So
times.
that's a really good point for everyone to be aware of is, like you said, you prepared when they came back in the knowledge that there was going to be a different reaction between what they were experiencing over there and what they were going to get when they came here. Did they get used to that?
Yeah, they did. They did.
Yeah.
And, we turned it into a little bit of a routine. And this is what happens at mum's house, and this is what happens when you come back, or this is at dad's house. And, on that point, the boundaries are going to be different at both houses. So they did in the beginning, they would come back with, oh, well, we're allowed to do that at mum's house.
Yes.
Or dad doesn't make me go to bed.
Yes.
So there was those little niggles that would come back where the rules and boundaries were different between the two houses. So we had to stand really firm that that's okay. When you're at your other parent's house, that's their rules based on their values and their parenting style. But when we come back to our house, these are our rules, and that's going to stay firm each time you come back.
So did you and Rob find it difficult to stay on the same page with those rules?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah,
who's tougher?
Rob's tougher,
right? So you're more of a nurturer, right? You want to nurture them and look after them, and Rob's the big bad guy that comes in and
he likes things a little more ordered than I really like, I guess. So he is tougher with the boys,
right?
We haven't actually touched on the fact that now we have.
Yeah, I was going to definitely get to that for everybody, right? So you've had since, so you've got like 3 boys, and now you've had a little girl yourself, who is now, of course, the youngest.
Yes,
and
so we've got that whole dynamic shift again in amongst all the kids.
And definitely plays that dynamic, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And so how did you, obviously with some guidance, from being involved with the relationship code, but how did you and Rob get to a point where you could be on the same page with your different parenting styles and discipline?
Honestly, it's just communication and having that awareness that he's going to parent from his experience. So I know where, his rules come from, and I can approach some understanding of that, but say like, hey, I don't think that really works that well. Or, focus on the results that we're getting with the kids. If one of them is not responding to us, then it's a conversation about, okay, what are we doing to set that up, and what do we need to change with our parenting to make that child respond better to us and to build that better relationship with them.
Yeah.
It's a lot of communication about the rules.
Right. Yeah. And so obviously when you do that communication, that enables you to be together before you go to the kids, right?
Correct. Yeah. We would never discuss that in front of the kids. And something else, that we've had to work hard at is not to jump in and defend our child. So if Rob is pulling Noah up on something, I can't jump in and defend Noah in front of Noah, because that's going to fracture their relationship even more.
Yes. Yeah.
We say those conversations, in front of the kids. I would agree with him. If we need to have a conversation about whatever was happening, then I would do that with him later. But we cannot jump in and save our kids from the other parent, because that actually just destroys the relationship even more.
Yes, and it would also put pressure on your relationship with Rob, right?
Correct. Yeah, absolutely.
Yep. So now, like in a lot of relationships, how we discipline the kids becomes a point of destruction and argument for us.
Yes.
So for everyone that's watching right now, if you do have any questions, you can post the questions up right on the live, and Kate, our very able assistant, will send the questions to us, and we'll definitely respond to you while we're on here. So Angie, on that point of like when we're arguing over, how we should discipline the kids, or the kids are getting between us, and we're feeling that natural parental protection. Did you find in the early days that at times you wanted to jump in and protect Noah from the discipline?
Yeah. Yes. Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Honestly, I did find that.
Yep.
Like I said, I tried really hard not to do that in front of Noah.
Yes.
But it still come out in a conversation that wasn't delivered the right way later. Rob would feel like I was attacking him.
Mm-hmm.
He would then become defensive. And instead of actually helping to change the way he would parent Noah, what effect it would have is it would put more strain on their relationship, because now Rob feels like he and Noah and I are ganging up against him.
Mm. Yep. Yep. And if the parent then is feeling isolated, as you must have felt at times with Rob kids, right? Stepping in.
Yeah.
Did they ever, like when you were at home with them and you disciplined them, did they then run and complain to Rob?
I feel that they possibly did
Yeah.
a little bit. They would also go to their mum,
Yes.
which would create a whole different kettle of...
Great point,
Yeah.
right? So let's dive into, the parent that's not there when it comes to this dynamic. So, every blended family experiences this dynamic, right? Because just naturally, you and Rob are going to have a different parenting style to his kid's mother. That's going to be natural. And if the other parent is perhaps, not, emotionally aware, you can easily be enrolled into the kid's story about what happened, right? So did you ever get painted as the big bad stepmother?
Yeah, absolutely. I think she still hangs on to that, if I'm honest.
Yeah.
The kids don't, but I think she still hangs on to that. And of course, that dynamic almost encourages more of it. So if they know that she, turns that information into something bigger, they give her more of that information and it becomes more and more of something that it is not, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. And did the same in reverse happen for Rob? Did your ex ever?
Oh, look, I think there was a couple of incidences. We're really, really lucky on that side. We all actually get along really well, and I don't remember that being an issue. There's a lot of respect on both sides.
Did that happen easily, or were there things that you had to do to create that?
No, that was a conscious choice.
Yeah.
We've certainly had disagreements at times, but we all work really hard to put the children first in that relationship. So we don't hang on to those disagreements, and we have worked really hard to build a relationship. He's got a stepmom in Geraldton who is beautiful, and I've got to know her really well, and I appreciate what she does for him. So I think our relationship is built off that. We appreciate each other rather than focusing on all the differences. And we could certainly get sucked into those differences in parenting and what goes on at Dad's house versus what goes on here, but we choose not to do that.
Okay. And with your own daughter that you've now had together.
Yeah.
So tell me about her and how she works into that dynamic and how that dynamic works for you and Rob.
Yes, so interesting. So we had the 3 boys, and then our one that we had together was a girl. So that already places a different dynamic. She's the youngest. She knows that she's different, and she kind of laps that up, if I'm honest. She plays up to that. And so that does definitely at times create animosity between her and the boys at different times. The older ones are old enough and mature enough to know she needs more attention because she's the youngest. But definitely between her and the next one, Noah, I think there's 5 or 6 years difference between them. They niggle the most, and I think it's still that battle for attention between them. So conscious of that, and we really have to think about, like, how can I balance out my attention? Even though she needs more of it, how can I give them quality attention, give them what they need outside of that?
And that's a really good point, isn't it? Because it doesn't matter whether it's a blended family or not. You're always balancing the attention between the kids, right? Trying to give them all the time what they actually need. And that is a big task to do.
Yeah, and they're naturally times when one will need more attention. While she's been the baby, she has needed more attention, but then we've got to balance that out as quickly as possible. We've got to get back to that. You know, one of them might be struggling with exams or struggling at school, and they're going to need some more attention from us, but we've got to quickly get back to how do we balance that amongst all of the kids equally.
Yeah. And that balancing act really does take a lot of emotional intelligence, which is obviously what we do inside, well, not obviously, but for those of you that are listening, that's what we do inside the relationship code. We help everybody level up their emotional intelligence so we can really see what's going on. Like one of the questions, I think it was Noreen that asked the question, how do you stop the conversations going back to the other parties? And I think, Noreen, the answer to that is you can't stop those conversations going back to the other parties. And so you have to build, I think, as you said, Angie, right? You have to build a line of communication with your ex-partners.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think if you do try and stop that from going back, you try and tell the kids not to tell the parents what goes on at our house. If you start trying to do that, it actually ruins your dynamic and your relationship with them even more.
Yes.
So you've got to be really careful not to tell them what to say to the other parent. You've just got to trust that the other parent will figure out, you know, what's real and what's not real. Or if they run with, like in my case, if they run with the bad and want to hang on to that forever, then that's the way it is. But you know, if I was to tell my stepkids not to go home and tell their mum that I busted them for something, then that would only be ruining my relationship.
I agree, because it sets up a dynamic of, well, now I've got to be really careful for the child who I talk to. And that's a massive pressure, right? You know, of what I can say and what I can't say to the various parents and homes that I'm in. That's not a healthy thing that we want to put on to our kids. And so it does take a conversation with your ex-partner to go, look, we're going to have different parenting style. The kids are going to come and say different things to you. And I'm sure when they come back to me, they're going to say things about you. We need to be talking about that and really find out actually what went on. And we both want the best for the kids. And how can we handle that? Now, if you don't have that sort of relationship with your ex, it's a slow process, right, Angie, to build that?
Absolutely. It's, what did I say? We've been together for 8.5 years, and we're still hoping for that one day on one side. But we just have to keep doing the right thing.
And I think that's a really important point, right? No matter how your ex responds to you, you have to keep doing the right thing for the family, no matter what's going on outside. And I think one great strategy that we obviously talk about a lot is the kingdom strategy, which is it's you, it's Rob, it's the kids, and that's your kingdom together. Yeah. And whatever happens outside of that kingdom happens outside, not inside the kingdom. And you want to react to what's going on inside. So to answer your question, Noreen, you don't, and you focus on what you can do with inside your kingdom with your partner. Now, we had another question too, Ange. I don't know whether you can see these questions or not, from Vanessa. How can my partner and the 15-year-old daughter start to fix their relationship? Great question. As with, say, Rob and Noah, it's a work in progress, right?
Yeah.
And it's a continual work, isn't it? Like you continually, as a step parent, have to work at that. And at times, like we talked about this, I don't know your exact situation, but I'm imagining, and you can correct me if I'm wrong here with another comment if you like, that your partner's probably harder on discipline than you are, firmer, because that's normally the case. The step parent does tend to be firmer on the discipline. And that being the case, then it's going to create a disconnect with your daughter. And as the biological parent, what you can do to help is really build on both sides there to support that relationship. To tell your daughter, like, you understand, but also to make sure that, you know, like Angie's talking about, you're not overly protecting your daughter when it comes to things, because that's going to make your partner feel isolated and he's going to get tougher. So we often talk about the seesaw effect. If one partner is weaker on the child, the other partner will try to become much, much harder and tougher to balance it out. So when it's our child, we need to become firmer so the other partner doesn't need to be. And you'll see that dynamic. Would that be your experience too, Angie?
Yeah, absolutely. That's exactly right. If I jump in and go softer, it makes things worse for them. So I do have to be onto those things. But I also have said to Rob, like, if you're noticing something and it's bothering you, let me know and I'll be on that too, rather than letting it build resentment inside of you towards him. Have a chat to me about it and we'll both deal with that together.
Yep. Yep.
And I think that makes them feel supported. And the more supported they feel, the less they're going to be hard on that child.
Agreed. And Noreen's asked the question, like, how do you deal with parents treating the children differently, different rules for different children, etc.? Well, it's part of that balance I've just been talking about, Noreen. You have to have a talk with your partner. Generally, what you find in virtually all relationships is when it comes to any topic, we're opposites, right? Because everything in this universe is opposites. Everything. And when men and women get together, we're naturally different sexes. And this applies even in the dynamic when we talk about emotional states of masculine and feminine. Even in a same-sex relationship, we've got same-sex partners parenting a child. You're still going to have this dynamic of the opposites going on. So if one parent is weaker, less disciplined, the other one is going to toughen up a lot. So you have to have those conversations to reach a point of compromise where it's the best thing for the child. Now that opens up a whole different conversation, right, Angie, in terms of, what are best practices? How do we raise our kids with love, but also resilience, right?
Yeah. We were very fortunate too. Before we did get married, we did 12 months of mentoring with Maureen. And we focused a lot on this particularly. And she said to us, if you've got this big long list of rules and things to follow, it is going to make it harder and more confusing for the kids. What you really need to do is figure out what your three main rules are that you both want to stick to equally with all of the kids.
Great advice.
Just on those three things, rather than having this big long list of expectations and demands for your kids. They're kids. They are going to do kid things. So figure out what's important for both of you and then try and let some of the other stuff go.
Yep. So just reading Rebecca's comment, kids were 12 and 13 at the time. Kids are 3 weeks on and off now. The daughter doesn't want to be in the same house as the son due to trust issues. Relationship got stronger as we followed the relationship code pyramid. The kids can see that, but we are missing our kids being there every other week. Look, that is tough, Rebecca, and that unfortunately is one of the dynamics that we have to live with, when we go through a divorce. And so you have to realize that in certain circumstances, kids are going to feel pulled between the different households, and they're going to feel loyalty to both parents, but they'll tend to lean to one. But what I've seen over the years is that even if they're leaning to the other parent besides you, your ex, that tends to balance out as they get into their late teens and early 20s. They start to get a life perspective on it and start to get released from the dynamic of trying to please both parents. Now, you may feel like, well, they're pleasing the ex. That's the situation they find themselves in and feel like that's what they have to do to be able to do that, to survive. Because if they don't, then they feel like, well, this parent needs my support more than the other one. So in some respects, if you look at it from that perspective, it's actually a bonus, because what they're seeing is perhaps that you don't need the support, perhaps that you're more balanced. And the other one is the one that actually needs the support from them. That's how they view it. I know that's not a reality, but that's often how they're going to see it. And that is tough. I know you've been through that, right, Angie?
Yeah, absolutely. In both directions, actually. My eldest stepson lives with us full time. He made that decision a few years ago now, for different reasons. But I certainly have empathy towards his mum for how that must have felt. And then Noah has definitely at times expressed that he wants to go live with his dad. And it is difficult, and we do just have to trust that showing up consistently, continuing to do the right thing, trying to keep that line of communication open and to not feel hurt by their feelings and burden them further with our hurt by them wanting to make a choice. They do come around.
So with Charlotte, have you and Rob ever disagreed about how she should be parented?
I think not overly. I think we're lucky in that we've done a lot of this work.
Yep.
And so we've already had a lot of conversations about what's important to us. We know each other well enough to know our parenting now is pretty similar. Yep. What we do disagree about from time to time is, I mean, she's a daddy's little girl, so I do have to say to him at times, like, you know, you need to stop letting her get away with so much, or you know, you can't just give her treats all day long. It's little things like that. We don't have, we're obviously, and it's thanks to doing a lot of work on this, we don't have a lot of big disagreements about parenting.
She's a very vivacious, aware little girl, isn't she?
She was very vivacious at 4 o'clock this
morning. Lovely. So she's worked out how to wrap daddy around her little finger. Is that the story?
She's got him.
Yeah.
So I guess that's our biggest challenge with her, is just recognizing when she's doing that and finding a way to make sure it's not happening too much.
So what do you think are the, let's just say, 3 most important things that we need to be aware of when we're raising our kids? In other words, any kids. Like, how do we want them to turn out, right? So what do we need to give them as parents, I think really is the topic I'd like to discuss now.
Yeah.
So
I think it's important to know that when you have a child, your job as their parent is to raise them so that as they grow, they need you less and less.
Agreed. So gradually letting go is a big thing, right?
Yeah.
And one of the concepts we talk about, again, in relationship code is we talk about priorities and where we get our needs met from myself first, unselfishly, partner second, kids third. And the reason we do that is that we don't want to put the emotional pressure on our child to meet our emotional needs. And sometimes parents unconsciously will do that. So I think that's a big number 2, right? That we don't want to be putting that pressure, like I was explaining before, where the child's going between households in the blended family situation and feeling emotionally they have to support this parent. Now, even if they're all our biological kids, we don't want to end up in that dynamic where they're watching and saying that, you know, mum needs emotional support or dad needs emotional support. We don't want to put them in that situation. And I think number 3 is we want to raise them with resilience. That no matter what they're facing, they can come to us and feel like they can come to us and discuss it and get advice. Now, that's a fine balance, right? Because as parents, we can, as Maureen said to you, we can over-parent them.
Yeah, absolutely.
And what's the result? What have you seen when we over-parent, when we're telling them too much? You know, there are too many things we're telling them what to do and not to do.
If we're telling, well, if they feel like they're being controlled, kids, they often will rebel against that.
Yep, absolutely.
And so you get the opposite effect of what you're trying to create. I do think that it affects your relationship with them if you're trying to tell them how to be all the time. And that does sort of stunt that flow of communication that you want with your kids. I think, you know, while they're little, you might think you're getting away with it, but as they become teenagers, they're less and less likely to come to you and to talk to you and to open up to you if you have been too controlling with them.
Absolutely.
And what's going on.
I think that, you know, hits on your point number 1, right? Which is there is more control when they're very small. There is more guidance and more suggestions, more boundaries when they're small, right? But as they get gradually older, we want to release those. And it's funny that today, Chase is my son, who's seeking to be an actor, training to be an actor, has started watching some very old classic movies. And one of them is a James Dean movie. And the movie is about this young rebellious man who's like 17, 18 years of age, and the dynamic between him and his parents. And a lot of parents make the mistake that you've pointed out, which is as they get older, still imposing all these structures of telling them what to do. By that stage, they want to be making their own decisions, and we want to be guiding. And sometimes you've got to let them fall on the ground and, you know, bloody their knees.
Yeah, absolutely.
But be there to pick them up, because that's how they learn. And they are going to make mistakes. You're not always going to be around them, and that's just not possible. So as they get older, and particularly in their, you know, teens, it's around, okay, I've gradually got to let control go here and let them make mistakes. That doesn't mean letting a 13-year-old, you know, go to a rave. What it means is gradually allowing them, you know, to have access to phones, and allowing them when those phones have to be, you know, turned off, and all those sorts of small things. And I think the great thing about the relationship code events, but also community, is that we're very much not just about the marriage and the relationship between the parents. We're also very much about the family and passing, you know, these new skills on that we can learn to the family. And I said three things, but I think there's a fourth one, which is really important. And that is that we become good examples as parents of what love really is. You know, how to be open with each other. And open doesn't just mean communication. Open means being energetically open, and also removing the blocks to love that perhaps many of us have been through, where we're not comfortable in being fully open with our partner. We want to show that openness. And I know you and Robert work very hard, right, to remove those blocks out.
Yeah, absolutely. We've done a lot of work on ourselves and our childhood stuff to get to that point. And it is for that reason we want them to go out and choose to do the same thing in their own relationships and in their adult life. We want to show them how to do that well.
Yeah, absolutely. Totally agree. So everyone that's been on the live tonight, this is the first of many that we're going to be doing this year, just inside the group. And we're going to be releasing an app as well during the course of this year, which is going to give you a lot of exclusive content from us that you can access at any time. And the reason we're doing the live in the group is we want to encourage this to become more of a community, to share all the problems. Because one of the things that, if you make the decision to come to one of our events, you'll get to see, and I think it's a great thing about the event, is that you get to see the problems that you think you're facing that are unique are actually not unique. We all share the same problems. And what we've been able to do over the last 30 years of doing this work is hone down to what actually works for families across all areas, across parenting, having a great relationship with your partner, just day to day, but also in the bedroom, how to raise your kids, financial things as well that are very important to all of us. So I want to thank everybody for being here tonight with us. We really appreciate it. And also, Angie, thank you for making your time available.
Of course. Apologies for the technical delay in the beginning.
Yes, I'm sure we'll get better at jumping onto this. For those of you that were there at the beginning, we tried to do it on our laptops, and for some Facebook reason, it would not operate on our laptops, so we had to go to mobiles instead. So also thank you to all the people that asked the questions, because questions really help us. I mean, we can give you as much content you know, as we can think of, but if you ask us very specific questions, then we really appreciate that, because then we can tailor our answers to exactly what you need within this community. And that's what we really like to do, and that's why we're doing these lives on a continual basis from now on. If you're not sure of the dates, have a look in the posts inside the group. We've posted up the dates already, and we'll also remind you all the time as those dates get closer by posting up an event inside the group. But if you have any questions for us, you know, that we haven't answered in these lives, please post a question in the group, and we'll definitely answer it for you. So Angie, thank you so much. Thank you for everybody for being here.
Thank you, everyone else.
All right. Have a good night, guys.